Good afternoon, and a very good afternoon. Welcome to the show, welcome to VUEGRAPHY, and today's video is sponsored by, not by Nikon, no, no. This video is not sponsored by anybody. It's just that I just found this shirt in my closet. I said, okay, why not make today's video wearing Nikon shirts? And of course, Nikon was kind enough to give me that. And the reason I chose to wear this shirt for today's video, because today I'm going to just talk about the new mirrorless camera, what I feel about them, and the pros and cons, or like the overall feedback of the Nikon mirrorless breed. So let's jump into the business. Let's talk about the Nikon mirrorless camera. Alright, okay, so before I get started and I start talking about starting with Z6 or Z7 all the way to Z9 or even Z30, using which I'm making this video. Yeah, I'm making this video Z30 as we speak, and as I speak, I mean. And this little pocket camera is really good. I mean, really, really good. Anyways, so before I started Z6, Z7, everybody was saying to Nikon and Canon that they jumped 5 years late into the mirrorless race. Logically speaking, on paper, that's true. Both Nikon and Canon, they joined the mirrorless market late, and those 5 years gap was cashed by Sony, and that's totally right. But people are not looking at the big picture. And what is the big picture? This is what I'm going to explain you today. The big picture is both Nikon and Canon, they did their homework for the 5 years time, and based on that, what they did in 5 years. In 5 years, they were just working on what kind of breed that we have to think about. They look into the future of the lenses, what kind of lenses that we have to go for mirrorless, because mirrorless is all about video. That's reality. Mirrorless is all about video. So in order to do the video, we have to design lens in not like DSLR. So it means that when we are not going to design the lens through the traditional DSLR way, it means that we have to design the lens from video perspective. And in this way we can. Why don't we go for a bigger mount? So both Nikon and Canon both decided to change their mount. From F mount, Nikon went from F mount to Z mount, and Canon went from EOS R mount to RF mount. So what basically it gives a huge advantage for both Canon and Nikon. Like by shifting into a bigger mount, like releasing the mirrorless camera with an entirely new mount, it opens up the new gate to make lenses which Sony cannot offer in their E-mount. Yes, like for example, Nikon released 58mm f/0.95. Can Sony make it? No, they can't. Just like Canon make 28-70 f2 zoom lens. f2. Can Sony make it? No, they can't. Is the limitation of the E-mount. Basically, E-mount was designed for APS-C camera, which Sony is still using for full frame. It's a proof. I mean, it's a known fact. But somehow, Sony is working around, with the help of Sigma and Tamron, and still able to make 1.4 lenses, and in some case 35mm 1.2 or 50mm 1.2. But they can't go beyond that. They can't make 58mm 0.95. Not like Nikon. They can't make 28 to 70 f2 like Canon. So in order to achieve these kind of exotic lenses by Sony has to change the mount. And if Sony going to change the mount from E mount to any other, whatever the name they're going to call, it will cost a huge loss for Sony. Huge loss for Sony. People don't realize that. People don't get that. Nikon and Canon, they are not stupid. They did their own work. And in 5 years time they decided to go for a bigger mount, so it will open up the whole world for them to make exotic lenses, which Sony cannot do it because of the small mount size of E mount. So that's the short version of the answer of that, why Nikon and Canon joined mirrorless race late. Okay, now let's get to the business. Let's talk about the Nikon mirrorless. Well, I used all Nikon mirrorless camera, all of them, except the N1 series, the one series which was introduced 5-6 years ago, but they were not successful at that time, and it was never received well to the world. So I never touched those N1 camera, the 1 series camera. I never experienced. I have no idea what kind of camera they were. Z6 I own at one point of time. I bought it, and the most common complaint about I'm going to talk a little not so good thing about those cameras first, and then I'm going to talk about the good thing about those cameras. So the not so good thing was, of course, the autofocus system. The Z6 and Z7 both struggled with autofocus. They were not able to track human face, and even with the firmware update they were not able to be as efficient like the competitor, and that was entirely true. And it's the whole flaw was the processor. The processor inside Xperia 6 was not able to, and it was one processor. So Xperia 6 processor was not enough, not able to do the calculations per second uh, to make an efficient autofocus system for Z6 and Z6 too. And then, but once the look for, besides the focus, and the second not so good part was they both come with single card slot, and it was a big issue by the many compare guys, right? Why it's a single card slot? We are having two card slots in the competitive camera. Well, the Canon R or Canon EOS R and RP, they both were single card slot. If I'm not wrong, they both were single card slot. Even Sony A7 and A7 Mark II both comes with single card slot. So even A7 Mark II was the second generation camera, still it had single card slot. So what's the fuss about Z6 and Z7, which are the first generation of the camera? They were with the single card slot. I don't know, but people did make a lot of noise and lots of fuss. But again, here is the thing: both Z6 and Z7 comes with XQD card slot, and the failure rate of XQD card slot was much less in compared to the competitors. And your SD card slots fail numerous times, but if how many times your XQD card slot got failed? Of course it's immune to fail, but how many times XQD card failed? You know the answer. I'm not going to judge anybody. I'm just saying the failure rate of XQD card was much less than the SD card. By the way, I have a question for the Sony user. XQD card technology is Sony proprietary. Like it's Sony. Anybody who's going to use XQD card slot in their camera, they have to pay Sony a certain fee. But Sony never used XQD card in their camera. Why is that? Just why? Can any Sony user answer me that? I mean, if the size is the limitation, all the Sony cameras are almost equal to the size of Nikon Z6 or Z7 II, Z6 or Z7. If Nikon can squeeze the XQD card in the same volume of the camera body, why can't Sony do it? But Sony never did. That's a good question, and nobody so far answered me any of the Sony user. Nobody did. It's just another fact. So, uh, Z6 and Z7 both were having single card slot, but XQD was much more reliable, less immune to failure, unlike SD card slot. But dynamic range of those two cameras were really good. I used and I had no complaint about the ISO performance. Dynamic. We all know how the Nikon camera dynamic range are of regardless if it's a DSLR or mirrorless, and those camera dynamic range was really good. Of course, autofocus system, which was known, and I shared with you why the reason was, and single card slots. And of course, no battery grip. There was no battery grip. So that was another third reason which was not welcomed by many professionals. But people still use Z6 and Z7 and they they go bonker. After 2 years, Nikon released Z6 II, Z7 II, and what they did, they introduced two X-Speed 6 processor to balance the load, to do the more calculations per second when it comes to autofocus system, and the autofocus for both Z6 II and Z7 was improved drastically, like literally drastically. And they introduced a new autofocus, like the box. So if I am having two person, one is here and one is there, and I've moved the box to my face, the face tracking will go on this rather than the person over here. So that was also helped by um, uh, too many professionals to do the video and all that efficiently. Like I said, mirrorless is all about video. People don't get it. They just say, well, photography, go for mirrorless. Man, for photography you can still do with DSLR. It's the video that you have to think about, and for that you need reliable and auto autofocus system which can switch easily from person to person based on rather than you have to do. So mirrorless is all about video, not the photos. So uh, Z6 to Z7 to double the processor, double the processing power, improved autofocus system, same dynamic range. By the way, in Z7 II, yeah, that's important. The SNR firmware inside the Z7 II was considerably better than Z7. Yep, the high ISO noise performance of Z7 II was better than Z6 II. Oh, Z7 II. Z7, sorry. Z7 II ISO performance was better than Z7 because they improved SNR firmware, and the same was applied for Z6 II. Z6 II is the highest low light camera as per DxO mark for Nikon Z6 II. So DxO mark is basically a platform where we compare the sensor output, ISO performance, color depth, noise level, blah blah blah, all these technical things, and how good the camera is when it comes to image quality. And where there is a category called portrait, no, sports. There's a category called sports. So sports is basically defined for high ISO performance. The highest the number, it means that the better the low light performance, and Z6 II is the highest when it comes to Nikon. Of course, there are a couple of other cameras which are higher than Z6 II, which you can check it out by yourself. So Z6 II is the highest low light photography, low light camera, the best low light camera from Nikon, and Z7 II was still up, very much improved. The low light high ISO performance, considering 45 megapixels. So that's, and Z7 II, Z6 II both comes with two card slots, XQD and SD card, UHS2. So it was welcomed feature by many, because professionals love to work backup. I can't shoot backup, of course. In my older cameras like D700, it comes with one card slot, so I have no other choice. But I shot with D3S most of the time, which comes with two card slots. So I still prefer to go with two card slots. And then we have Z5. Z5 was not welcomed by many because of few things. First of all, it doesn't have those features which Z6 II were having. The price of the Z5 was much less, so they were thinking of maybe it was not good and autofocus system was not good enough because it's less price, so it comes with mediocre stuff. But that's where the more almost everybody was wrong about Z5. But let's talk about what's the difference between Z6 II and Z5, because both are having 24 megapixel lens. Z6 II 24 megapixel, Z5 24 megapixel. But after that, that's where the difference starts coming between Z6 II and Z5. Z6 II comes with the PSI sensor. It means that you are having a little bit of improved low light performance only if you are doing pixel peeping, and Z5 comes with the traditional sensor, non-BSI in the layman terms. Z6 II are having 2x6 processor for load balancing and improved autofocus performance. Z5 comes with one out of XP6 processor. The same autofocus points, the video 4K without any cropping. Z5 comes with 1.7 times 4K cropping. So that was the catch, which turned off a lot of people. Oh, there is a crop factor of 1.7. But here is the thing. I'll come to the video part later, but Z5 and yeah, EVF. The EVF of Z5 was not much as vivid or as crisp or as efficient, especially in low light, unlike Z6 II. Z6 II EVF much better, much better than Z5. Also, the low light autofocus capability of Z5 is not like Z6 II. So Z5 was to hunt focus all the time. But again, that's where the user issue comes, in my opinion. Because I used Z5 more than Z6 II, and I found that the type of photography that I do, the type of the video that I make. Okay, I started this video with Z30. All right, and I have to stop the video because I just found that the battery of the Z30 was not charged. So the earlier part of the first 16-15 minutes of the video was made over Z30. Z30 is on charging right now. I am filming this right now with Z5, and as you can see, it's all good. Z5 in full HD, even in 4K, like I don't see any issue in autofocus. But if you think that by just thinking of your camera I'm going to do autofocus for everything, only if you are thinking, then I don't know what to say to you guys. I mean, I don't know. In general, normal videography, in normal scenario, which like 99% or let's say 95%. Z5 fits so perfectly that in my opinion, Z5 is the best full frame entry level mirrorless camera in the world. Like literally. It have a competitor like S5 from Panasonic, and Panasonic video specs much better in compared to Z5, but for a layman like me who doesn't do much video processing, for me Z5 is more than enough. We are living in the world of reels and stories on a small screen. Who wants to see 4K on this small screen? Who wants to see 4K? Think about that. Do you really want to see the 4K in this screen like this? Can you see the difference? Come on. So I don't see a point of shooting the reels or YouTube videos in 4K which you are seeing on this smallest device. I don't see a difference. I don't see a point, except it's going to put more time for your post processing, puts more storage in your in your hard drive. So you are ending up having a non-efficient workflow for your stories, for your social media content. So I found Z5 so much efficient, and the image quality between Z6 II and Z5 only you are going to see if you are zooming at 400%. I haven't seen any significant difference which pushed me to switch to Z6 II or Z6. Why? Because Z5 it doesn't have a good autofocus system, or it doesn't have the 2x86 processor just like Z6 II, or it has a BSI sensor. Z6 II got a BSI sensor, Z5 doesn't have the BSI sensor. Oh, I can't do landscape. Seriously? There are many images of my Z5 landscape and you can't see any difference. Let me put some on the screen right now. Yep, these are taken by Z5. And I use 2470 f4 lens. For me, this camera is more than enough. In reality, if you want to switch to mirrorless, because everybody is switching to mirrorless, so Z5 is the best starting point for you because it costs nearly the half against the Z6 II. If you get refurbished from Nikon, that's more cheaper, less than the half of Z6 II, same 24 megapixel. If you shoot full HD video 1920 by 1080, then you won't find any difference, literally, until unless you want some dynamic autofocus transition from foreground to background of the people are running around and you want the autofocus to stuck. Well, by the way, I used subject tracking in my Z5 and I barely lost any autofocus in my video or even in my photos, barely. You even with the high-end camera, you still, even A1 or R5 or even R3. These are not even Z9. They miss the focus. The machine, it's a machine. Machine are immune to do mistakes. It's the user behind the camera who make it efficient. I use subject tracking all the time in my Z5 and I don't see. If I know if in low light situation or less contrast situation, if I autofocus is not working, I immediately engage the subject tracking by using one of the programmable front button, FN2, and I just press this FN2 like this and immediately switch, immediately turn on the subject tracking. I move the autofocus, the box to the eye, and I just press the AF on and it starts tracking the subject, which exactly eye autofocus works like that. Again, is the user in the end of the day. So yeah, Z5, it's really underrated camera in my opinion. And this video, this part of the video is I'm recording on Z5, and as you can see, it's working so perfectly fine. Okay, now before I go to the big boy, let's talk about the small ones. And the small ones are, of course, the Z50. Z50 AF performance was much snappier, much stickier, unlike Z6, and it was welcomed by many professionals for making B-rolls or video, and they prefer to have Z50 other than Z6 because AF was really good. The only thing which I still do not like about Z50 is the flip screen down for selfie. I was like, that's not the right thing in my opinion. But that thing triggers a business case. That flip screen down triggers a business case for the tripod collar or the Z50 camera mount tripod. And people specially made an L bracket for Z50 so they can flip the screen and still can use the camera on tripod. It was used as a business case. So that flip screen down was an business opportunity for the camera accessory manufacturers. So I found it very interesting. Then I used ZFC, fashionable camera, retro style, lots of dials and stuff. Its autofocus was really good, especially low light was really good. The image quality really good. Both Z50 and ZFC, both 20.9 megapixel camera, both having almost the same SNR firmware, and except the battery, even the battery was the same. And then I used the Z30, and I already made a lot of videos about my opinion and my experience with Z30, which you can check on VUEGRAPHY channel. I already published it, and you can see my hands-on experience about Z30. Actually, I like Z30 more than Z50 or ZFC. Yep, I'm telling you my honest feedback. I like Z30 more than Z50, more than ZFC because of its overall package. The image quality, the video, the autofocus stickness to the human face or human eye was really good, like really damn good. Especially for photos, I was like, really? And the price of Z30, it's so less. Like, the price actually convinced me to push myself to explore that machine more and more, and I found it really good. So now the big boy, Z9. You're probably thinking he's saying Z6 not Z6, but he's saying now Z9 not Z9. I don't know. I always call Z9 not Z9. Z6, Z62 never, came out from my tongue. So it's Z6, Z7, Z62, Z72, Z5. See, Z5. It doesn't come out from my mouth, Z5, Z5. So it's like Z9, not Z6, not Z6. So anyways, it's just me. You can say whatever you like. So it's Z9. Yeah, it's Z9. Alright, when I can call me that we have the Z9 and it was not announced. It was only announced. It was never released to the market, and the only piece came to the Nikon Middle East office. They called me. They said, "Would you like to have an experience of Z9?" Like, sure, why not? Who doesn't want to experience Z9? So many features, 120 frames, blah blah blah, 8K. And I went and I experienced, and I was like, damn, like literally, damn. The here is the thing. What makes Z9 superior than rest of the Nikon DSLR? Even on top of that, rest of the mirrorless camera, except couple of the top bodies from the different brands. Z9 literally on top of the all the mirrorless cameras, regardless of the brand, except couple of other companies, other competitors, high-end camera bodies, which I am not going to name, which you can figure it out by yourself. Yeah, I'm talking about the number 1 and the number 3, all those. So Z9 is basically the major difference of Z9. I used Z9 for 4 months, heavily, practically heavily, and I showed in almost every kind of scenario. The Z9, what makes Z9 the monster of the camera is its the processor, which is XPeed 7. XPeed 7 processor is nearly 12 times efficient or stronger than XPeed 6. 12 times, nearly 12 times. So it means that whatever the Z6 II, or not Z6 II, sorry, Z6 can do, the Z9 can perform 12 times or 10 to 12 times faster than the same task that Z6 can do. Nearly 10 times faster, 12 actually. That's why it can do 20 frames per second RAW, 30 frames per second JPEG, and 120 frames per second shoot, which no competitor is offering right now as I'm making this video. No competitor. How come Nikon achieved 120 frames per second? Well, actually, it's very simple. The camera is recording. What is video? Video is the still images. It's stitched together in a form of back to back and you play those back to back frames, so it makes a video simulation. So you have to stitch those individual frames. What Nikon did, it records the 4K 120 frames video and it never stitched them to make a video form. So those 120 frames per second, they dump into the card without stitching. So they were individual frames, individual image. That's how Nikon achieved it. It's very simple. So that's it. And the XPeed 7 processor can perform 120 frame, 20 times calculation of auto exposure and autofocus per second. That's how efficient the XPeed 7 processor is in Z9. And people mostly say, well, Z9 cannot do 30 frames per second RAW unlike the competitor. Well, here is the thing. You have to understand these camera bodies are not supercomputer. They are compact little computers inside microprocessor which have to do so much effort for you that you can't even think about it. You have to understand is that the higher the megapixels, the more load is on the camera processor to process it quickly and dump it to the memory card. So if you are having higher megapixel, it means more data coming out from the processor, more data is coming out from the sensor, more load into the camera processor. It's simple. If the megapixels are less, then less data coming out from the sensor, less load on the processor. So processor can efficiently do more frames per second, right? That's how they achieve. For example, the Canon flagship bodies right now is R3. R3 can do 30 frames per second, full width raw, no compression. How it achieved 30 frames per second? Uncompressed raw. Because the number of megapixels are less, 24. But the other competitor, Sony A1, can do 50 megapixel 30 frames per second raw, but their raw is 12 bit, not 14 bit, and it was not marketed. See, no company wants to market the downside of their flagship bodies or of their any camera product. It's not 14 bit raw. That's why the less information is coming out from the A1 processor, so camera were able to do 30 frames per second. It's a fact. You can go and verify. I'm not making it by myself. But what Nikon did, Nikon reduced the number of frames per second from 30 to 20 for raw, but 14 bit, full width, no comparison, no file reduction, nothing. You get 20 frames per second raw, go for it, and 14 bit. So if you want JPEG, JPEG is a compressed RAW. What is the difference between RAW and JPEG? It's just the JPEG is the compressed form of the RAW file. That's it. So when it's compressed, it means you can do more process. So 10 more frames makes 30 frames per second. Full width, 45 megapixel JPEG. And 120 frames is 11.5 megapixel. Those because 4K width, how the Z9 achieved 120 frames per second, because it records 4K video 120 frames per second and it dumps them into a memory card without stitching them. So 4K is 12 megapixel. Yeah, 4K is 12 megapixel. If you have 12 megapixel camera, you can shoot 4K with it. Okay, so it's just 11.5 megapixel JPEG, 120 frames per second. So that's how Z9 achieved this feat. And Z9 has the fastest sensor readout. Why I am talking specs? But I'm just giving you the performance that when I use that camera, I was tracking the bird like that. The only issue that I faced with Z9 that I did not have the fastest CF Express Type B card with me because I was keep facing buffer filled. It's not the camera which buffer filled, it's the card. XQD card was slow, camera was fast. This is the first time I saw that any camera was so fast trying to dump the data into the memory card and memory card was not able to keep up. This is the first time I saw, to be very honest. Usually the cards are faster, the cameras were slower. Z9 is the first camera where the camera is faster, cards were slower. Actually the one that I have. There is a Cobalt, Pro Grade Cobalt Series B card, I believe, or A, I don't know, which got 1700 Mbps read and writing speed, something like that. And that if you use that particular card, you can shoot unlimited without any buffer issue till the card get filled. There are tons of video on YouTube where the people are showing you it's not the Z9 having the buffer issue, it's the camera, it's the card. If you're using XQD card made by Sony, so you will end up having buffer issue with Z9. If you're using Pro grade card, you're probably not going to see any issue. And I face a lot of buffering issue because I was tracking the bird at 120 frames per second, and I was like, after 3 seconds, like 3 to 4 seconds, the camera buffer, the card buffer got filled, and I was not able to dump more images, and I was surprised. But I found a lot of things interesting in a Z9. The 4-wheel tilting, which I found in XH Fujifilm XH1. I love that tilting. So not only up and down, but it also going like this. So you can tilt, you can shoot the camera like this, and it's still able to tilt the screen like this for a portrait mode. Z9 comes with an internal built-in battery grip, so it means that you can shoot more frames per second, longer battery life, professional grade camera body, take any beating. The hinge at the back of the camera LCD of Z9 is really, really strong. I mean, really strong. I was not expecting that. 2 card slots, of course, professional backup, and 45 megapixel. And it has a very great dynamic range. Now you're going to say, well, we have 4 cameras now, 45 megapixels. Z9, Z7 II, Z7, D850. Which one is the best? The only, by the way, just stop here right now. The only thing what differs Z9 among the rest of the 3, Z7 II, Z7 and D850 and Z9. The only difference is Z9 never gives you an option of uncompressed RAW. Yes, sir. It doesn't have uncompressed option because Z9 built for speed. That's why all the data, and it has an algorithm inside Z9 which makes the raw file output nearly equal, like 99% equal, or just like uncompressed raw, like Z7 II, Z7 or D850. All these 3 cameras can provide compressed RAW, lossless compressed RAW, and uncompressed RAW. Z9 is the only one which gives you 3 options: lossless compressed, high efficiency compressed, and high efficiency compressed star. There is no uncompressed. So I believe that's the drawback of Z9 for not having an uncompressed RAW. But I think Nikon purposely did that because they just want this camera built for speed. So camera doesn't have to worry about the camera processor, don't have to think about anything else to process or anything. It's just, okay, uncompressed, by default the coding of the raw file, by default uncompressed. So let's pack a compressed raw, start dumping. So that's how the camera able to perform so fast, which is good if you are shooting sports action wildlife. And it's, by the way, no, yeah. I was surprised in Z9 that as the only camera where I can customize my own autofocus points. The box that you see in Z6 II and Z7 II, you can customize that box horizontally, vertically, or even vertically expanded like that, or like that, or like that, or if it's a horizontal line, so you can just 1 line or 2 line or this line, or you can make a square. Z9 is so amazing, like literally. You can customize your own autofocus points. You can do a lot of things. So many customization options. So Z9 is the big boy, and my experience with Z9, I'm going to buy Z9 one more time. Yeah, I bought it, but I sold it immediately after 4 months. But I earned using it. I earned a lot, and I returned back all of my investment, which I did. But I earned from Z9 much more than what I have paid for. So I have not only I got my money back, I also got paid for the content or whatever the job that I did using Z9. My experience with the Z9 was really incredible. I mean, in my opinion, Z9 is the of course is the best mirrorless camera from Nikon so far, and I'm expecting that upcoming rumored Z8 going to have the same type of autofocus system like Z9. It must have the same XP7 processor, same autofocus performance, more megapixel, 8K recording, just like Z9. So and Z8 must have these features which I just said, because without those features, I don't see to have Z8 in hands. If you don't have the Z9 autofocus system, 8K recording, 30p or 60p, I don't see any point. By the way, Z8 is going to have all these features for sure. That's my feeling, and I hope the Z8 contains those features. So that's my wrap up, my thought about all the Nikon DSLR and mirrorless cameras. In the second episode, I only talk about the mirrorless camera. The first episode, I was just talking about the DSLRs. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening me out all this time. And I was trying to be neutral, trying to be honest with you guys, give you the honest feedback, what I think as a hardcore Nikon user think about those cameras. Of course, no camera company is perfect, and same goes for Nikon. No camera company makes a perfect product. Every camera company, when they release a product, have pros and cons. Z9 is also, it's not a perfect machine. It's also having something missing, just like 30 frames per second. I wish it could have, but it is not. But it's a technical limitation. It has nothing to do with the company. Some companies compromised on the output of the camera just in order to achieve the numbers. Like Sony A1, it aims 50 megapixel at 30 frames per second but 12-bit RAW. Same 30 frames per second by Canon R3, uncompressed RAW, but it has having less megapixel. So there is a compromise at both ends. In Nikon, they compromised on the number of frames per second. Instead of 30, they stick to 20. But full res, RAW, and 14-bit. Yeah, it is compressed, but there is no other option in Z9. So yeah, these are the cons, which again, it's up to the user who's going to take it or not take it. Maybe the Z8 will come more megapixel with uncompressed RAW, with 8K, with Z9 autofocus. Then probably Z8 is going to be the flagship camera. But right now, Z9 is a flagship camera. So that's it. I hope you like this video, and in future I'm going to make videos about the lenses, hopefully, and we'll see. I'll see you guys in future with some new content. Till then, take care. Bye.